All right, guys, so we've got our cylinder head here all set up. I'm just going to show you guys all of this stuff now on this engine here, all right? So let me throw on my gloves. So here we have a valve cover. I know you can't see my face. It's kind of spotlighted here. But here we have the valve cover. What's the purpose of the valve cover? The purpose of the valve cover, guys, is to, let me turn up my volume here. Okay, so my volume's up. The purpose of the valve cover is to cover the valves, all right? So when we take off the valve cover, take a look. Woo! Valve cover's off, just like we just saw in the animation. So there's the valve cover there, okay? You've got all these different holes here. You've got 6 of them because those are for the spark plugs, because this happens to be a gasoline engine, all right? So you've got your 6 holes there, all right? And that's because you've got 6 spark plugs that have to go into the combustion chamber, okay? Good. Here's my valve cover. Bottom of the valve cover, we got a bunch of seals that go here. I showed you this the other day. Inside my cylinder head, okay, I've got my camshaft. So I've got a camshaft here, and I've got a gear here, okay, that would spin the camshaft. So there's a sprocket here, all right, and that would allow the camshaft to turn. So on this side here, there is an additional camshaft, but I've removed it, okay? And there's a housing that it goes into, but here's the camshaft right here. So, okay, here's the camshaft right here. And what I showed you guys on that tutorial is the lobes, all right? So if you're looking at the camshaft here, you can see that it's got these lobes on it. And these lobes are right here, okay? And that's the thing that causes the valve to open and close, because when this thing spins, okay, it presses on certain valve train components, and it allows the valve to open. So if you're looking at this, there's only one place here where the valve is going to open, all right? So when we're looking at the camshaft, the valve will be close from here all the way around to here, okay? So from my finger here, all the way around to here, the valve is going to stay closed. But as soon as we get on the lobe, which is just this little area right here, okay, that will allow the valve to open, okay? Camshaft, right here. Okay, goes into this little housing here. And what's really neat about these is, if I show you this, So I've got my bearings, okay? So these are my bearings. These little shiny things here, these are the things that allow the camshaft to spin, okay? So the camshaft kind of sits in here, and it spins in these things called the bearings, all right? And if you remember what we were talking about, in order for these things to stay spinning and to not overheat, we have to have oil, okay? We have to have a very thin layer of oil between this camshaft, okay, and these bearings. And if you guys are looking real close, now this has been sitting around for a while, you can see the oil. There's still oil sitting on there, all right? Why? You have to lubricate this sort of stuff before you put the engine back together, okay? This cylinder head wasn't ready to go back together because we got thrown out of school in March, I believe, okay? But they were ready to pull it apart, okay? And they had started pulling it apart. They weren't putting it back together as yet. That's why some of that oil is still a little bit dirty, okay? Housing, camshaft. And if I could bring this closer, I don't think I can, but I'm pretty sure that you guys can see it. Okay, let me just bring it closer, and I'm going to use my trusty pointer and take a look. I hope it doesn't stop, because sometimes when I move it, it stops. But take a look right here, guys. So, okay, so if we're looking right here, the oil passages that we saw in the tutorial, in the animation, okay, it showed oil coming up to lubricate the camshaft. And you can clearly see there's a hole right here. There's a hole here, okay, here, here, here. you guys can see those. You can't see the other two or three because it will run the other side. We got hole, 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 and there's a hole here. All right. And what that is for oil under pressure to come up to lubricate. These, oh my gosh, these things right here. So on the camshaft, we've got bearings on the camshaft, and the oil comes through this thing, through a hole, and it lubricates this camshaft here. And that's what prevents it from overheating, and then eventually seizing, okay? So I want to turn this over, and I want you guys to see what's on the opposite side. My camera's not. Turn this over. I'm going to show you guys what's on the opposite side of this, okay? So inside here, you guys might be able to see it. Yes, you can see it, okay? And I know it's big enough that you can see it if you're looking on your screen. Inside here, you can see the springs. I'm going to turn the light on, and I'm going to shine it so you guys can see it even better now, okay? So underneath the camshaft, okay, if you guys remember the video, the camshaft is over on this side because this one is different, okay? But you can see the springs right here. We got springs right here, okay? And those springs represent where the valves are. So the valves are in between these springs, and the purpose of the spring is to close the valve, okay? So on this side here, we've also got springs, and you can clearly see it. So if I'm touching this spring right here, you can see it. It's a coil spring. The little coil spring that's right here. They've got one out. I might as well show you that. Every student for every engine and every group, okay, has to take out one intake valve. Well, this one's the exhaust. And they have to take out one exhaust valve, okay? And how do I know the difference between the exhaust valve and the intake valve? Very simple, okay? Whenever we're looking at the valves, okay, the smaller valve is always exhaust. The bigger valve is always intake, okay? Why? Because we want to be able to draw more air and fuel in than we push out, okay? So exhaust is always a little bit smaller than intake valve, especially if it's only if it's got an equal number of valves, all right? So this particular car here has 4 valves per cylinder, so the intake has to be bigger, okay? If we've got an odd number of valves, well, that changes things, okay? Because now we would end up with, let's call it 3 valves per cylinder. You're going to end up with 2 intake valves and 1 exhaust valve. Well, the intake valve is usually smaller because there's 2 of them, okay, which still represents more surface area than 1 exhaust valve, okay? So 2 valves they have to take out, okay? These are the springs. And they would be responsible, okay, for removing the valve. And the only way that you can remove the valve is to compress the spring with the valve spring compressor. Those of you that I had in grade 10, remember that was the bonus question. That was the bonus question on the test, okay? The valve spring compressing tool. And I showed you guys how it worked. Probably I would have showed you guys how it worked in the front of the, it would have been in the front of the room on the cylinder head that I have in the front of the classroom. So there's a spring, there's the other spring, okay? Then you've got these things. You've got your retainers, okay? And the retainers retain the valve on the spring. So it sits like that. The valve sits in here like this. So the valve comes through the retainer, okay? And then you've got these tiny little locks. Let me just show you how this works. I'm just going to put it together real quick. And you guys would have been responsible for putting all this stuff together because it wouldn't be me. It would be you doing it, all right? And as you do it, you learn, okay? So now you put these together like this. So now you've got these little locks that kind of go on together, okay? And the little locks kind of look like this. Okay, it's not showing you very good, okay? But anyhow, those little locks go in. And now, okay, now we get to lock the valve to the valve spring because the little locks are located inside here. And again, these guys would have to put this back together. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to put this engine back together alone because on this particular engine, to be able to put these valves back in, it's kind of like a 2-man job. But I'll get it done. I'll probably probably struggle with the 2 valves today, but I'll get it done somehow. I'll figure out a way. Okay, so valves, okay? Valves, okay? Let me show you the valves on the opposite side. So we're going to try and finish this up today. Let me flip this over. When I flip it over, take a look at this. Got some silver head bolts that are falling out. And I'm not too worried. Okay. I've got to turn this around this way for the camera. So small things kind of falling out because I've got it upside down. But now, at least you can see the valves. Okay. So here on this particular engine, okay, these are the 2 valves that they removed. Okay. 1 valve here and 1 valve here. Okay. 1 intake, 1 exhaust. Now, if you guys can see it, I'm sure you guys can see it. Let me show you. And I know I asked you guys this before because I showed you the ports. And I think I asked Alexander and I don't remember who the other person was, but I remember Alexander identifying the property. So take a look at this, guys. All right. We've got 2 holes here. We've got this one here. Okay. And you can see that nice and shiny. And if you look at this one, it's all black. Okay. So if I've got some people here, Casper, let me ask Casper. You got to turn on your microphone though. Casper, what port would this be, the shiny one? And I know we spoke about this earlier. So if you've got it nice and clean and shiny, what port would that be? Would that be the intake port or would that be the exhaust port? Oh, my bad. I think I've got my speaker turned. Nope, my speaker's up. Go ahead, you can speak.
Exhaust?
Nope, if it's clean, it would be.
Oh, if it's clean, it's intake.
You got it, okay? So guys, if it's nice and clean, the only thing coming through this here is air and fuel. So it's always gonna stay nice and clean. However, on the opposite side, okay, on the opposite side, it's black, all right? And if it's black, okay, it means that you've got all these burnt gases going through it. So this is the exhaust side, okay? So take a look at this. I'm gonna take this thing, all right? And I'm gonna push it through this right here, this hole right here, and watch what happens, look. Oh my goodness, look at that, all right? So now we know that this is where my exhaust valve sits, and this is where the exhaust valve is gonna go through. So if the exhaust gas is coming out of the cylinder, goes through the valve, past the valve, and it comes out through this port. You can see my rod coming through that passageway right there. So that would be your exhaust port on the cylinder head. And if we get 2 valves, and you remember what I told you, okay? Okay, I said the intake valve is generally bigger and the exhaust valve is usually smaller. So if you're looking at these holes, maybe you can't see it exactly, but if I do this, okay, if I put this one in the wrong hole, you're gonna see, and it is not gonna seal it. It can't even go in because the stem is a little bit bigger, okay? So here's my intake, and my intake valve is gonna slide in here, but we've had them removed, don't forget. So there's my intake valve, and once it closes, okay, it's gonna seal nice and tight in that cylinder. And I'll take my exhaust valve, I'm gonna put it back in here, and then it's gonna seal that right there. So that exhaust valve, once it's closed, will not allow any air to come out of this port right here. And once this intake valve here is closed, it won't allow any air to come through. Let me show you this because. So my intake port, okay, comes from here, and you can see my pointer here coming through. So my intake port is on the opposite side of this, and it's nice and clean, right? Got a nice clean intake port because the only thing coming through it is air, and fuel, okay? There we go. So before I leave this, and I'm gonna ask this question and I'm gonna see who can answer it, okay? And I always tell students this. once you pull your engine apart, you'll know this answer. One of the things that you would have to do is you would have to fill out a form. And on that form, it will ask you the number of valves per cylinder. And you can either find out the number of valves per cylinder by looking on your specification sheet for your engine, or pull your engine apart, all right? And once you pull your engine apart, you can clearly see it. So let me ask, let's get, who haven't I picked on today? Laya, if you're looking at this, okay, first of all, let me see if I can, let me fix this camera. 1, 2, okay, so now, okay. So Laya, if you're looking at this engine here, how many cylinders does this engine have, Laya? If you're looking at it, how many cylinders does it have?
6.
Say it again.
6.
You got it. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good. So Laya just said 6. And how do we know that there's 6? Here's why we know there's 6. All right. If you're looking across here, here's the top of one circle. That's one cylinder. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we all know it's a BMW inline 6, so we know that. So these things form the top of the cylinder, and they seal all the gases coming out of the engine block. Okay. Who can I ask next that I haven't picked on? Canton. I haven't picked on you. Canton, how many valves per cylinder do we have on this engine? There's a valve sticking out. So how many valves per cylinder do we have on this particular engine? And maybe, I don't think I've ever heard Canton's speak. So maybe he's got it up in the chat. See something going on here. No, the last question was Devin. So, Canton, how many valves per cylinder do we have on this particular engine? You can throw on your mic and you can throw it up in the chat because I can see it now. Any idea? And I always puzzle students with this because they're like, how should I know that? And once I show you this, you're going to go, holy smokes, it makes so much sense, right? So, Lenny, I know you have the answer. How many valves per cylinder does this engine have?
4. I don't know. Looks like 4 to me.
4. Exactly. Lenny says, I don't know, but it looks like 4 to me. And that's how easy this stuff is, right? So I'll always stump some students on that question because they're not really paying attention, okay? But Lenny says, 4 looks like 4 to me. Of course, he's perfectly correct. Okay, look. Here's a valve that I just pushed in. There's a valve right there, okay? That's an intake valve. Here's an exhaust valve that I just pushed in, okay? There's an exhaust valve right there. It's smaller than the intake valve. You can see that, right? You can see that the exhaust valve here is smaller than the intake valve. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, all right? So once you pull your engine apart, you can look at and understand some of this stuff. It's not that difficult, right? It can be tricky in the beginning, but on this particular engine here, we've got 6 cylinders and we've got 4 valves per cylinder. Okay, that's how simple this stuff is. It's not, there's nothing to it. All right. Tomorrow, what I'm going to do